Welcome to All Home Care Matters, the show where we discuss all things home care, with discussions on important age-related matters and topics. Brought to you by Enriched Life Home Care Services, the #1 rated home care provider in Michigan by Top Rated Local.
Hello, and welcome back to All Home Care Matters. If this is your first time visiting us here at the show, we want to say thank you for taking time out to be with us today. We appreciate how valuable everyone's time is, and that's why we try and make each episode here at All Home Care Matters something that will hopefully matter to you. Today, we are honored to welcome Elena Sallitto, Certified Elder Law Attorney. Welcome, Certified Elder Law Attorney Elena Sallitto. Welcome, Elena. How are you today?
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Our pleasure. I introduced you as a certified elder law attorney. For our viewers and listeners who may not be familiar with what that is or what the difference is between certified versus just elder law attorney, would you mind taking a moment and explaining that?
Sure thing. And probably the easiest thing that people will understand is the difference between a physician and a board certified physician. And that's the same thing with elder law attorneys, that there is a specialty bar and that you need to take an additional exam. You have to demonstrate a certain level of experience in matters that are germane to elder law attorneys. And you also have to have recommendations from, I think, 5 other certified elder law attorneys and ascribe to a certain level of ethics. And it's a certification by the National Elder Law Foundation. And that's what allows me to be a certified elder law attorney, having met those requirements.
Interesting. Kind of touching a little bit on your personal and professional background, what led you to specialize in elder law, and how has that field really evolved or changed since you started it?
It's interesting. I actually took a hiatus from practicing law for quite a while. I raised my kids. And as I started to go back in, I said, well, elder law seems intriguing. At the same time, my parents were getting older and I was starting to have that experience. And I went in starting to think, well, this is a relatively new area of law. So how complicated can it be? How much do I really need to learn? And I discovered it's very complicated. There's a lot to learn, but it's just an amazing fit for me. My prior legal experience had been with antitrust, trade regulation, consumer protection issues, very, very focused on money. Elder law issues is about absolutely everything that makes us human. And it touches on every aspect of every life in the country.
Okay, that's a great answer. And thank you for kind of explaining that. So I want to, because everybody always talks about, do you have an attorney? You need an attorney. We see all the billboards, the TV commercials. But, elder law, and I appreciate this because, we deal with a lot of families who have elderly loved ones, parents, grandparents, spouses, and, estate planning and advanced directives, wills, power of attorneys, trust and all that. But I don't think people really understand the significance on having an attorney who is certified and specializes in elder law versus just maybe going to your local family law attorney. What distinguishes elder law from general estate planning or family law?
Our focus is a little bit different. Estate planners are all about maximizing your estate for your heirs. Elder law attorneys are more about maximizing your resources for yourself as you meet the challenges of aging. We tend to be a little more cognizant, we are more cognizant of, what long-term care costs are. Where do you get them? How do you get them? Are there government benefits that can be leveraged? We're very much involved in that part of the world. And that's what we incorporate into our planning. And then what's left, absolutely, we can take care of it for future generations. But we also plan for the future generations in a way that preserves assets from still long-term care costs post-death, because there are post-death long-term care costs if you don't watch out.
Yeah. I want to kind of stick with, because I mentioned estate planning and wills. I want to stay there for a moment, Elena. what are some of the most common mistakes that people make that you see when creating a will or an estate plan?
Um, it's funny. I ran that question by one of my by my associate. I said, if somebody were to ask you that, what would you say? And she said they do it themselves. And that is a problem because you don't know what you don't know, and people are trying to save save money, which is absolutely understandable. And it looks like this should be easy enough to do. You answer some questions online, and boom, you have your legal documents. But you don't necessarily get the documents that serve your purpose. And then you don't realize it until it's too late. And you may end up needing a guardianship, or you may end up exposing your assets unnecessarily to long-term care costs. So absolutely, the biggest mistake is just kind of going it on your own. At a minimum, people should have at least a consultation with an elder law attorney before they really get their documents in place. Then they may decide they don't need an elder law attorney at all. They can do it on their own, fine. But at least learn what it is you should be watching out for.
Absolutely. I don't want to answer this one for you, but I'm thinking I know the answer, but you might educate me here. And that's why we are so excited to have you here to help educate our viewers and listeners, because this is not a simple cut and dry, go to a website, pre-fill out a form, situation. That's a mistake we see families actually make that we meet with when we'll ask them, do you have this? Do you have that? And, one of the children might speak up and say, oh, mom and I went online and filled out the form at, LegalZoom or, whatever. But at what age should somebody really start thinking about seriously about their estate planning, and what are some of the essential documents that they should have in place?
The first question, at what age? As soon as you're over 18. Because once you hit majority, then if something happens, that iron curtain of privacy has come down, and no one is going to be able to talk to your financial institution. Healthcare is a little different, but especially your finances, that it's private. So as soon as you are age majority, if you have any assets, do a financial power of attorney. You don't have to give anybody immediate access to everything you own. It can be effective, just upon your disability. But you need to start thinking about, if something happens to me, then how am I going to be taken care of? And we've had issues where, you think of these as primarily issues that involve older people, but it's not true. Accidents happen every day. My God, we had one client who actually snuck out of his house to go play baseball. He was 43. He had young children. His wife said, "Don't go play baseball. Please don't go play baseball." And he said, "No, I'm going to go to the local Home Depot." But he ended up going to play baseball. He was on first base, and and I don't know baseball, so excuse me for the verbiage but whoever batted hit the ball and ran right into him at first base. The guy fell over backward, hit the back of his head, lost consciousness, never regained.
Wow.
Nothing was in place. There was a guardianship that had to be done, and then Medicaid planning for long-term care. So you'd never know. So for a few $100s, you do a financial power of attorney, and at least somebody is there to take care of you if you need it.
Yeah, absolutely. What are some of the documents that people may need to have prepared ahead of time to make it easier when they go to meet with an elder law attorney?
What you want, not necessarily documents that you need to prepare ahead of time, but what you want to know is, what you own, what your assets are, how they're held, meaning how are they titled? Are they just in your name? Is there a beneficiary? Are you joint owner with somebody else? So you definitely need to know that. But the most important thing is also to figure out who your fiduciaries are going to be. Who's the right person who's going to be acting on your behalf if you can't act for yourself? Who do you trust? Who's got the skills to do the job you're asking them to do? So those kinds of things. And a lot of that would be fleshed out during the course of an interview with an elder law attorney, because they're going to start to ask you questions that have you thinking along, certain lines, and maybe thinking of things that you hadn't thought of before. But Generally, that's the kind of that's the kind of information that you want to go in with.
Yeah. And I would say, and I'll ask you because you're the attorney, but we advise families when we meet with them, more specifically to like their healthcare power of attorney, living wills, that sort of thing, advocates that they're going to designate. It's great to have those people in mind, but we always suggest before you put them down and name them, have a conversation with them first, just to make sure they're comfortable, because a son may not want to have to, bathe and dress their mother, or, a daughter may be too, emotional to have to make some of the tougher decisions to enforce her mom or dad's wishes, so just talk with those people just to make sure they're comfortable with that role.
Absolutely, absolutely, and something that parents may not realize, parents of adult children, your adult children may have already had a conversation among themselves about, mom and dad are getting older, and what do you think, and who should be doing what. So they may actually have their own system that they've kind of set out, and then for you to have your documents kind of affirm what they want their system to be could make things easier all the way around. So absolutely have conversations about that.
Yeah. I want to kind of stay here because this is our specialty, healthcare and long-term care.
Mhm.
What is the biggest difference in, again, I want to help educate our viewers and listeners when it comes between Medicare and Medicaid, to long-term care, and, how can families really prepare now for that potential cost?
Uh, People don't know. It's a shock to them when they find out that Medicare does not cover long-term costs. Everybody thinks, oh yeah, I got Medicare, I'm covered. No, you're not. And that's when people are just, beside themselves. So the difference is, Medicare covers curative. Medicare is your health insurance. Long-term care is not covered by any insurance unless you have long-term care insurance. So if you don't, and you can't afford the exorbitant charges,
Right.
then you are looking at leveraging government benefits, which would be Medicaid. And depending on your state, you may be stuck in a nursing home, which is what we have in Maryland for the most part. But there are other states that do have what are called waiver services that make it a little bit easier to bring those Medicaid benefits at home or in an assisted living facility that accepts their waiver services.
Yeah. And, I was saying we want to share that for our viewers and listeners, but, surprisingly, Elena, we deal with healthcare professionals that don't truly understand what Medicare covers and doesn't cover. We'll get a discharge from a local hospital to take care of Mr. Jones, and they'll say, he'll need about 8 to 12 hours of, in-home care a day, and he's going to be home tomorrow. And we're like, we're a home care provider. We're not a home health care. And if we were home health care, we still couldn't provide that level of care and support. I think there just needs to be a better awareness for these families by the healthcare side as well as their own side, because, you don't know when disaster is going to strike. Like that gentleman playing baseball, they probably didn't know, one, he's not going to get Medicare because he's 43, but, they don't know what's covered, what's not covered, what's available, what's not available. And that's why we like doing conversations like this with, with certified elder law attorneys like yourself, so kind of staying in the healthcare lane for a few more minutes. Can you explain what a healthcare proxy or a medical power of attorney is and why that is so important?
Sure. That's the person that is going to be making healthcare decisions for you if you can't make them for yourself. And there are a couple of ways to have that happen. One is if you designate somebody in advance, and usually it's in a document called an advance directive, where you yourself appoint the person that you trust to make healthcare decisions on your behalf. And they're what they need to do, what they need to understand is that they are supposed to be making healthcare decisions that they know you would make for yourself. So, not what they wish you would do, not what they think is in your best interest, but that person is supposed to be advocating for you. If you don't have that designation, then most, if not all states, have some kind of healthcare surrogacy law that steps in, and they will provide a hierarchy of decision makers if you can't make decisions for yourself, which can be good, but also can be a disaster. If you are a parent and your spouse is gone, then your adult children all have equal say over what's going to happen next. And if they don't get along or if they disagree, that can be a bit of a problem, and you may end up with a race to the courthouse for guardianship. So it's always the best idea for you to designate in writing in advance the person that you know is going to be making the decisions for you if you can't make them for yourself.
Absolutely. And, we tell families it's never too early to have that conversation. And,
All right.
I can appreciate some adult children may not feel comfortable going up to mom or dad and saying, what do you want to do if you're going to die? Or, whatever that uncomfortable conversation may be. Or maybe they don't have that type of relationship with their parents or any number of things. So we say, always use an example of yourself, maybe you're making cookies for Christmas and you're with mom and, you could just say, yeah, my husband and I, we were just talking the other day and, kind of use yourself to maybe open up and start that conversation, because the worst time to make a decision is when you're under pressure, and like you said, it can lead to a frayed relationship between the siblings and they're racing to the courthouse, or, you don't know what mom or dad's wishes are. And you want to make sure they're enforced and that they're respected. But if you don't know what they are, maybe somebody's a DNR. And, we tell families all the time, Elena, if your mom, your dad, or whoever it is a DNR, that needs to be documented and stipulated, because just you saying it has no weight or authority. If the fire or the EMS come or they're in the emergency room, their job is to sustain life, and they are going to do everything within their means to do so. But if that's not what your loved one wants, you need to make sure that you have it documented.
Yeah, absolutely. And I tell my parents that their job is to leave their children, the decision makers, guilt-free and not second guessing themselves. So it's a gift that adults or that parents will give to their children, and it doesn't have to be a very difficult, deep, dark discussion. Very simply, just in fact, I was the healthcare proxy for my dad. And he just, would give me off the cuff things, don't ever do that to me, or I'm done with, interventions and I'm never going to the hospital again. And it was in the course of those little outbursts, if you will, over the course of a year, even, that I knew exactly where he was coming from. And that put me in the posture to really effectively advocate for him.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to kind of stick here just for another moment, because this is a big one, especially when dealing with Medicaid. What should families know about protecting their assets if a loved one may need a nursing home, stay or long-term stay in a nursing home in the future?
The thing that I think is the most counterintuitive is you're in a healthcare setting. You're in a hospital, you're going from hospital to rehab, then your Medicare days run out, and now you're looking at long-term care, or you've got a parent at home and they've got dementia and you can't take care of them anymore, so now you're looking to place them in a healthcare facility. The last thing people think about is, I should call my lawyer. But you need to call your lawyer, because your elder law attorney, because you are going into an arena that will happily take every penny you have, because the costs are so exorbitant. Here in Maryland, nursing homes are costing anywhere from $300 to $500 a day. Assisted livings can run, if you can get one for $4,000 a month, that's great. But more 10, 12, there are some that are even 15,000 a month. So the costs are really, really high. And Medicaid does have planning techniques built into the system that allows people to protect their assets. If you're married, the well spouse can keep pretty much just about everything. And if you're single, there are strategies that we can use that can help protect a good portion of the assets. Because the last thing that you want to do is bankrupt yourself become destitute, and then say, okay, now state, I need your help. Because the state covers you, but not all that well. And so if there's a way to protect those assets to supplement the quality of the care you're being provided in the nursing home, in Maryland, it's just in the nursing home, then by all means, you want to take advantage of that. And the only place you're going to find out about that is with an elder law attorney. So you have a healthcare situation, go see your lawyer.
I want to stay here for just another second. Be careful also. If you think you know how to transfer those assets, make sure you are doing it legally. I'm sure you have heard this far more than we have, but how many times we've heard a family member say, the nursing home's not going to cost anything. My dad has Medicare. Then we explain that. Then they say, well, then we'll just sign him up for Medicaid. And we're like, well, it doesn't work that way, because of his assets and wealth. And they said, well, we'll just transfer it all to my sister. And we're like, there's a thing called a look back, and they're going to see it and they're going to find it. And, you got penalties, interest, and fines on top of it, So I'll have you, since you're the legal expert, explain why and how it's not a good idea just to take all of mom and dad's savings and assets and just put them into a family member's name. And then next week think you're going to go enroll into Medicaid and have everything taken care of.
I'm glad you raised that, because it's not just putting things into the family member's name. A lot of people are putting things in what's called an irrevocable trust.
Yeah.
Medicaid has what's called the 5-year look back, and they look back a period of 60 months from the date you would otherwise be eligible for services to see if you've given away any money. So the test is, have you transferred any asset for less than fair market value for the purpose of qualifying for Medicaid? And anything given away within that 60-month period brings with it a penalty of, right now, it's 1 month of services for, in Maryland, about every $11,000 given away. And that penalty period starts from the day that you would otherwise be looking for services. So you get into, you're there, you're in the facility, you get yourself spent down for Medicaid, and you go, okay, here we are. Now I have no more money. I am down to, in Maryland, it's $2,500 in resources. That's all I have. I now need help. Medicaid looks at your application and say, well, you gave away $100,000 4 years ago. We're not covering you for 10 months. That means you need to have 10 months worth of payments. So let's figure you're at $15,000 a month. You damn well better have that $150,000 sitting in the bank, or you're not going to have any care. And you're not going to be able to pay privately because you've given the money away. There are ways to do gifting. It varies from state to state. In Maryland, we can take advantage of gifting and partially returning to kind of protect some assets. I'm not going to go into the weeds on that, but that's another one. If you've done a gift, absolutely you need to go see a lawyer. Other than that, if you haven't gifted, don't, until you do talk to an elder law attorney, and then maybe you do use strategic gifting with a plan in place that doesn't leave you high and dry.
Yeah. Thank you, Elena, for explaining that a little bit further. I want to kind of stick with legal protection, and, elder abuse also ties into that. How can older adults protect themselves legally from financial exploitation or even elder abuse?
That's really a tough question. Can any of us really protect ourselves from being scammed, or being hacked or whatever? I mean, you're going to take all the precautions you think you can. And so what I think I want to bring home is, if you have been scammed, everybody's been scammed. It's not a reason to be ashamed. It's not a reason to feel bad. You did nothing wrong. Every one of us has fallen prey at one point. Scammers do tend to target seniors because seniors are home more. They pick up the phone. There's a little bit more leisure time, so they have more time to be taken advantage of. In terms of legal protections, trusts are not a bad idea. To have someone else help you with managing money is often a good thing to have. Again, your documents, your financial power of attorney, absolutely is something to put in place. But the bottom line is, if you've been scammed, be upfront about it. Don't be bashful. Just say, hey, somebody ripped me off. Go to the bank. A lot of times the banks can try and help you get your money back. You can stop the perpetrator in their tracks. You can call your adult protective services people. They are absolutely wonderful at helping you stop that. But definitely, trust is a really good vehicle to have someone else also involved with the management of your money. So if there's a possibility that somebody is going to try and steal from you, needing another person's signature on things is a good kind of checks and balances, if you will, to make sure that you don't do something that you shouldn't be doing with the money.
Absolutely. What would you recommend to somebody if they suspect that one of their loved ones is being taken advantage of, either legally or financially?
Um, it depends on what's going on with their loved one. Um, the first thing I would do is have a conversation to find out what is going on, to see what they say about it, and then talk to them about, either, hey, do you realize you've been scammed? In which case you're going to call Adult Protective Services. You may go see an elder law attorney, or someone to try and get that money back for you. Or you may then change the documents. You may create the trust. You make sure you have that power of attorney in place. A lot of times, this is, I had a cousin who actually ended up being scammed by a caregiver. This woman swooped in, and my cousin was a baker. She and her husband had owned a bakery, and this caregiver swooped in and said, "Well, I'm going to, open a bakery, and I'm going to put it in your name. It's going to be Madeline's Bakery, and I just need $50,000." So all of a sudden, my cousin apparently, gave her 50 grand. The caregiver also got a lawyer, her own lawyer, came to the house and had my cousin sign a will. So even the lawyers can be complicit in these scams. I went to visit, and I saw this late model Mercedes in the parking garage in front of my cousin's house. And I thought, that's interesting. And it belonged to the caregiver. When I talked to my cousin, she said, "Oh, but she's like a daughter to me." Meanwhile, she had been estranged from her own children, which is also a kind of a red flag as to what's going on. At the end of the day, one of the children came back, and they kind of got reunited, and the caregiver returned the 50,000. The will got redone, and it was all put to rest. But had I not been there, she would have gotten basically everything my cousin had.
Wow. That's terrifying, because it's sadly very easy to do, and we have conversations with people, because here in Michigan, Elena, we're a non-licensed state for home care. And so what that means is, I could go to lunch today and, think the waitress was phenomenal, and, hey, do you want to maybe earn a little bit more money? Hire her, send her into any home. She may not have an ounce of experience or have a bad, background check, bad driving record, the whole 9 yards. But legally, I'm completely permitted to do that, which is terrifying. But I couldn't hire a plumber to come in my home unless they were licensed. So I say all that to say, we tell these families, you have to be so careful, at least here in Michigan, when you're hiring home care. If they tell you they're a company, make them prove they're a company. Ask to see their documentations. Do they have bonding? Do they have liability, workman's comp, all these things? We go through complete full background checks, motor vehicle checks through the Secretary of State, the whole 9 yards, because we want to be as protective as we can for our families that we serve. And it sounds like this lady might have just been a cash under the table kind of person.
Interesting you should say that. No, she was not.
Interesting.
She was through an agency.
Wow.
And we contacted the agency, and obviously she got fired, and I don't know what happened with what they did with her after that. But so you really do have to be very, very careful. Obviously, the agency had not vetted her sufficiently, because judging by the car, that had not been her first rodeo.
Yeah.
So, a lot of times you have people just going from place to place to place, taking advantage of people as they go. Things to look out for
Yeah.
is isolation. So if all of a sudden, like you're not seeing the loved one as much as you were, they're not coming to the phone, not taking phone calls, or if you do call them, everything is on speaker. Those are some of the red flags to look for, because they indicate that somebody is in a position of taking advantage of somebody else.
Yeah.
So just some things that family members should watch out for.
It's just horrific when people are taken advantage of like that. I'm glad you were there to kind of intercede and, stop it. But, unfortunately, not everybody has that,
No. Yeah.
So I want to kind of talk about another interesting topic that we deal with and that's guardianship and decision making. What happens when an elderly person becomes mentally incapacitated without a power of attorney or a plan in place?
Um, okay, so the first thing, capacity to do things is fluid. It's not either you have capacity or you don't have capacity. All of us, there's a spectrum. And when you've got a disease, a progressive disease like dementia or Alzheimer's dementia, slowly but surely over time, that capacity is going to diminish. So it's always, are they competent to do what, when? At some point, they are going to become not competent to manage their own affairs, either to make healthcare decisions for themselves or to manage their finances. That's when a need for a guardian does come in. It is a court proceeding and it changes. It varies from state to state. Different states have their different requirements to do it. Here in Maryland, it takes two medical professionals to certify that somebody is not competent. The person who's alleged to be disabled, we call it the alleged disabled, has a lawyer that's appointed for them. There is a court proceeding during which time the court decides whether or not the person does need a guardian, and if they do need a guardian, who that guardian should be. Now, very often when you're preparing your advance directive or your financial power of attorney, a lot of times the documents contain provisions in there that says, if a guardian is necessary for me, I want this particular person to be guardian. That designation is given enormous weight by the courts. So that person that you write down that's the person most likely to be guardian unless something awful happens. Otherwise, without that, then there's usually a statutory hierarchy as to who can be guardian, and the judge basically vets everybody. It can become a very lengthy, litigious, and expensive proceeding if there's some disagreement among potential guardians. That's where things get very contentious. But that's the only thing that's how a guardian becomes appointed. And once that person becomes appointed, they become responsible for everything about you. You effectively become the child and they become the parent. So you lose your ability to make decisions on your own, most decisions. And whoever that guardian is going to decide where you're going to get health care, where you're going to live, who you're going to see, the whole nine yards. They take over your life.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about the pros and cons of having a guardianship versus, the alternatives like a trust or powers of attorney?
With a power of attorney, the principal stays in control. In a power of attorney, you are designating someone to be your agent, really to work alongside you, to work for you, but not to work instead of you. In a trust document, you can appoint somebody to work instead of you. Financial power of attorney is generally not going to be instead of you. It's going to be able to work alongside you. So you're the boss. So guardianship would come into play if you've got a financial agent to protect you from yourself. because you may at some point, and it's interesting, like people who have been very high functioning, usually very well educated people during their more productive years, when they have dementia, it's very easy to hide. You would never know that a particular person may have dementia. And they're still in charge of their own stuff. We were involved in a case where there was a gentleman who um, had dementia, and very, very high functioning, and an old girlfriend found him. And the old girlfriend convinced him to travel halfway across the country. And he's out there. And so all of a sudden, it went from a weekend visit to, I'm going to stay. And then that turned into a phone call to the financial advisor that says, apparently, I owe this woman like $250,000 from a few years ago, and I forgot. So I need $250,000 to give to this lady. And the financial advisor, God bless him, alerted the agent under the power of attorney. And also there was a trustee, successor trustee, and said, do you know your dad is doing this?
Wow.
That led to an emergency guardianship, and that ended that. So, guardianship would be used to protect you from yourself.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. With housing and aging in place, are there legal or financial tools that can help older adults to stay in their homes longer if that's what they're choosing to do?
The first and foremost thing is you want to make sure that you're safe. So, obviously you're not going to stay in your home if it's not safe for you. Legal and financial tools, you want to make sure that people are in place to act for you if you can't act for yourself. But especially in a trust, you can put a lot of parameters in. So when you have a trust and you have your successor trustee, the successor trustee is supposed to manage your resources, your assets, in the way that you direct. And that's where you put your guidelines in. And that's where you say, hey, look, I want to stay home. And I want you to spend money in a way that makes sure that I have sufficient supports so that I can stay home. So you are kind of, even though maybe you have less capacity, you're still able to dictate or at least control somewhat what's going on with your life. So these documents, if drafted correctly, can really put out a lot of direction to whoever your agents are, to say, all right, yeah, you're in charge, but you're going to use my money to make sure I stay home. So that means if I need 24-hour care and you're going to be spending all my assets to get that 24-hour care, that's what you're going to do. Do not save my resources for the next generation. Spend the resources on me, and this is how I want to live.
Okay.
So it does help that way.
Good. Like yourself, we deal with a lot of families, and there's a lot of family dynamics, situations, things that may not even have been discussed for years and years. And now mom or dad is in a situation where the children need to come and, have conversations that they may not want to have. And it brings up old, vendettas and, grudges, and just, it can get uncomfortable at times. How do you approach those sensitive family dynamics when helping your clients with these elder law issues?
Upfront.
Mm-hmm.
You need to really tackle them up front. I find that very often when mom or dad are in trouble, all the kids turn H5. All the dynamics that happened around the dinner table, he did this and she said that, and, it happens all over again. And it can get uncomfortable. So to the extent that mom and dad have the capacity to kind of be the parent and say, this is how it's going to be, you take advantage of that, because mom and dad are the cops. To the extent that they lose that, then I like to get an advocate. I like to get like a home healthcare person like yourself, someone who's used to the terrain, who understands what mom and dad's needs are, to sit around the table and say, all right, this may be nice and you might want to do this, and Johnny, you may want to do it that way, but this is what mom needs now. And because, people don't know. They're not used to dealing with aging parents. So when you have a professional who understands what the challenges are today and what the challenges are going to be in the future, they need that information in order to make the best decisions for mom and dad, given the finances, given what's realistic for them. So to have that kind of family conversation with the lawyer, with the healthcare, aging life care specialist, is really the best way to make sure that mom and dad's needs are met in the best way possible.
Absolutely. We had a family not too long ago, Elena, and for us, it's always sad and heartbreaking when you see a close-knit family fall apart, and their divisions form when they were the closest of siblings and family prior to mom or dad now needing these, services. And it was two brothers. One brother was POA over finances. The other was POA over healthcare. And those intercede so often and regularly when you're dealing with long-term care issues. And the one brother over the healthcare had hired our company to take care of their parent. And the parent needed more help. They were starting it off kind of as a trial just to see how it would go. And that went on for about 3-4 weeks. And then the brother over healthcare said, yeah, this is working out so great. Mom's getting the meds on time. Mom's getting a shower every day, all the things, getting to her appointments, which took the burden off of the sibling, the brothers, to have to miss work and take mom and all this other stuff. And the brother over finances was very upset and didn't think it was necessary whatsoever. Now, this wasn't anything that was financially costing them anything out of what their perceived inheritance would be, because they had long-term care insurance, which is such a blessing when it comes to needing long-term care, right? And this went on for about 2-3 weeks, and we just said, well, that's fine. Whatever you guys decide, we're here. These are our recommendations. And then the brother over healthcare actually came by our offices, and he was almost in tears. He said he just got a call from their elder law attorney that his brother over finances went and met with him and said, I want to cash in and take all the value from my mom and dad's long-term care insurance policy. Now, this isn't life insurance. You cannot do that with long-term care insurance. It can only be used for long-term care. There is no cash value to redeem. And when he found that aspect out, he threw everything on his other brother and said, I'm out. You handle it all. And, it's just, we see sometimes greatness come from these situations and the best of people, but then you sadly also see sometimes the worst come out of people. And, that's the hard part of this job, and so I want to kind of ask you, what role do adult children typically play in the elder law planning?
I think you just described it beautifully. Not in the best way. When the adult children are on the same page and they support each other, it makes it so much easier on everyone. And that's where I see them, really taking full advantage of the resources that are available. The elder law attorney, the aging life care specialist, they call their local Department of Aging. They really utilize everything that's available to them. Where it gets dicey is where the money becomes the factor. And, a lot of times people look at the money as, well, that's my inheritance. And mom and dad really don't need it. And, what do they care? What difference does it make if they're in a nursing home? They're not, with no understanding. And that gets awful. That just gets really awful.
Absolutely.
It's sad to see.
It's very sad to see. It's very sad. And, I know we kind of had touched on this, but I wanted to kind of, because we're coming up closing here in a minute, but what are some conversations that these adult children should be having with their parents now, and maybe even with each other?
I think nobody wants to talk about it, but it's a conversation that people really, really need to have, because the consequences of not having a plan can be devastating. that's when you've got the crisis. Mom broke her hip. She's been taking care of dad, who's got advanced dementia. Mom's in the hospital. I live in Ohio. My brother's in California. My other sister's in Georgia. Nothing's in place.
Right.
And that happens more often than you would realize. So to talk about it, have an open discussion. Statistics are 70% of us who are 60 and older will need long-term care in the future. How is that going to be paid for? Who's going to be providing it? Where is it going to be provided? What kind of support systems are in place? What can you leverage? How much money does mom and dad have? Or do mom and dad have? And where are they going to be? Are they going to age at home? Does that make sense? Are they going to need to move into assisted living? Is a CCRC, continuing care retirement community, something to think about? Are they going to move in with one of the kids? Is one of the kids going to move in with them? Have that conversation. Yeah. And it's not necessarily going to be a one and done. It will evolve, and you need to know what mom and dad want too. It's not easy, but at least to start thinking about that, to avoid being surprised and going, okay, now what? And so just to try and be prepared as best as possible.
And it's never too early to start.
It's not, absolutely.
Well, first, I want to thank you for your time today, Elena. I got one more question before we go here, but could you share with our viewers and listeners where they can go to learn more about you?
Oh, sure. Our website, Stavely Sallitto Elder Law.com, I think is what it is. So, and always, just Google my name and I do pop up. Absolutely. The internet is best.
Yeah, and we're going to have it up on the screen for our viewers, but it'll also be in the show notes as well. But before we go, what's one piece of advice that you wish every family member would follow when planning for the future of an aging loved one? What's your one that just gets you every time?
Get your documents in place and get your documents prepared by an elder law attorney. If you just go to a traditional estate planning lawyer, they're not going to know the bells and whistles that need to be in your financial power of attorney. And you're going to end up needing guardianships because that's what we end up doing all the time. Your documents in place with an elder law attorney.
Well, I want to add, and that's great advice. I want to add one more question here. I said that was the last one, but one more. If life changes. So when somebody prepares or puts together their will, their trust, whatever it is, that doesn't mean it stays the same 10 years later. How often do you advise people to kind of just revisit their documentation to see if it's still the way they wish for it to be?
I think the general rule of thumb is like every 5 to 7 years. But you definitely, if you have a life change, if there's a death, if there's a divorce, if there's a marriage, you want to visit it at that point. And other than that, especially financial powers of attorney, because the banks will look at one and they'll look at one that's 10 years old. And even though the same people are who you want, they're going to go, that's too old. We're not going to listen to that. So powers of attorney, absolutely every 5 to 7 years. Other than that, whenever there's a major life change.
Okay. Elena, I just really appreciate you taking the time to visit with us today, all the work you're doing to help raise awareness about these elder law issues, and I encourage people to reach out to learn more about you. We appreciate you taking the time to be with us today.
Well, thank you, and kudos to you too for what you're doing. This is great.
Thank you, Elena. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us here at All Home Care Matters. All Home Care Matters is here to help families as they navigate these long-term care issues. We invite you to visit us at allhomecarematters.com, where there's a private, secure, fillable form where you can give us feedback, show ideas, or if you have questions. Every form is read and responded to. And remember, you can listen to the show on any of your favorite podcast streaming platforms or watch the show on our official YouTube channel. Just make sure that you hit that subscribe button so that you never miss an episode. We'd also like to say thank you again to Elena Sallitto for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you again here at All Home Care Matters.
Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to you joining us again on another episode of All Home Care Matters. To learn more about the show and to connect with us, Visit us at allhomecarematters.com.